literacy encompasses reading strategies in the content area. All teachers are said to be teachers of reading. The students have to comprehend the general concepts that you're teaching. They have to be able to make sense of their textbooks and any kind of material, whether it be in science, math, or any other discipline. So as teachers of content courses like science, you also have to be teachers of reading, really.
My name is Maureen Kalk, and I teach at St. Mary's School in Bloomington, and I teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade English language arts. Content literacy for my class, since it's English language arts, pretty much is my entire class, because the students have to be able to read and write for my class for world situations, and I do that in a lot of different ways. I have them read and write for nonfiction and for fiction, so that in the beginning of the year, we read articles from National Geographic, so it'd be nonfiction. I also work on current events with some students, so they might be reading a newspaper, so they're reading to apply their skills to the world. And then we also do novels in class that are fictional but have a lot of good messages out of them, and so they learn a lot through analyzing the novel as well as pulling out vocabulary, so they can really comprehend the text, and they also learn new vocabulary words. And then that can be done also through assessment, so they might write an essay as an assessment. They might just write something simple like a journal piece, and so that assessment could be something that's formative, it could be summative, and that really varies for my class.
Teacher learning has different components, from formal learning in college, obviously, but continuous learning through different types of in-service training, but also learning through experience with your kids, with your teaching in a day-to-day classroom setting.
Teacher learning. Teacher learning to me is pretty much the notion of praxis that Paulo Freire has given to us, where teachers engage in some kind of practice and then they reflect on that practice, and their reflection allows them to change their practice, and it's kind of this continuing circle that engages practice and reflection. And so the reflection can cause different types of pedagogy, different kinds of activities, different approaches, and the reflection can be, it can involve theory, it can involve talking to other colleagues, it can involve asking students how it went, what they felt comfortable with, how successful their students were. So it sounds pretty simple just to say that it's praxis, it's, you know, this continuous circle of practice and reflection, but each part of that is complicated.
If the teacher is not willing to continue to study and refresh and review and explore new concepts within their subject area, that person cannot legitimately expect her or his students to want to go further.
Right.
If all I'm interested in teaching is Spanish 1, you're going to learn colors, you're going to learn weather, you're going to learn time, you're going to learn greetings, the alphabet, AR verbs, and I am not willing to extend myself further, then how can I expect my students to extend themselves further?
Teacher learning to me involves quite a few different components. One would be professional development, so I think that's really important to take classes and to go to workshops. You can learn a lot from listening to other people speak, and even if you don't get a lot out of their presentation, you might get one little thing that could really change your classroom. This year I went to the Illinois Reading Council conference in March and went to probably 10 different speakers at least, and was able to pull different pieces out of each of their presentations to bring back to my classroom. I also presented at the conference, which made me reflect on my teaching and the lesson I presented, which I think enhanced it and will help that for next year when I reteach the lesson. So professional development is definitely really important. The other component would be just talking to other teachers at your school. So I have a mentor teacher, and she'll give me different tips, and I think that's really beneficial to have someone else in your classroom that can give you different pieces of advice on classroom management or how to do a lesson differently. And not even someone that's in your classroom, but just asking an opinion on something that deals with classroom management or content literacy from another teacher, I think is also important. And then the final component would be the student assessment and kind of getting to know the students. Every class you have to change based on how the class is and how their attitude that they might have as a class, and if they're students that typically love to learn, or if they're students that are struggling readers or struggling writers. So you really have to, for teacher learning, I have to make sure that I know my students well and learn a lot about them so that I can change my class and maybe change the way I teach that class. So I think professional development and collaborating with other teachers and really getting to know your students as well as analyzing their assessments would be three critical components.
Yeah, teachers have to be in tune with their students. As you become more mature teacher, you realize that there has to be a two-way system where you're not just a deliverer of content, but also a receptor to your students' needs, emotions, interests, their development. And when you get to that point, you realize that you have to try to address your students as individuals and try to reach out to them, try to put them in situations that they can be successful. You have to, as our schools have become diverse, more diverse as the years progress, and so you have to be in tune with the diversity from a racial, ethnic, socioeconomic standpoint, and understand that all students have the same resources, and you have to help some students a little bit more than others sometimes, and to address their personal needs.
Oh, lots of ways. I think it's really important for teachers to design in opportunities for students to give feedback and for students to do a lot of self-assessment and goal setting. And the goal setting and self-assessment happens within a structure of whatever the teacher designed. So the course goals, the curriculum goals, the standards, all those things are a part of it. But the students' activity and the students' participation in the learning, and then their their own self-assessment for the goals that they've set, or goals that maybe they have a role in setting. Those are ways that teachers can learn from their students. We read this semester an article that was about teaching with your mouth shut, and so I try to engage those ideas where I try not to talk a lot during class, you may have noticed, and I would much rather have my students talking, and I don't lecture. Maybe, I give information sometimes, but so I think it's really important that teachers cultivate ways to listen and design activities where students are in the role of demonstrating what it is they know, can do, care about, and believe.
A cultural example, I get invited to quinceañeras. Mm-hmm. Okay. By accepting the invitation, I'm building a relationship with my students, and I'm teaching them that reaching out is a payoff. Mm-hmm. I benefit because by accepting their invitation and attending these things that are very special, very family-oriented, mm-hmm. they are letting me in and will be more willing to work with me, more willing to talk to me. So that's one way. You learn from your students because you have not walked every path. I see things in a different view than most of the teachers here because of my life experiences. So listening to them and hearing them talk and absorbing their life stories helps me maybe not be a better teacher, but a better person, because it makes me more open to different lifestyles,
Backgrounds, yeah.
you know. If you're not open to hearing them talk and accepting their point of view and seeing that maybe what you're asking them to do is not unreasonable until you put it in their perspective,
Right.
then you're not going to function well, and they may come to class and they may work for you in class, but that'll be the extent of it. They're not really going to learn. So I think learning from students just how they live makes a big difference.
To follow that question up, how does a teacher learn from their students, whether it's socially, academically, or emotionally?
I strongly believe that as a teacher you need to learn your students from all different aspects, so academically, emotionally, and socially. Academically, probably most importantly, because like I said before, if you have a class that are struggling readers and writers or are not motivated to learn, then you have to find different ways to do that. So if you have a lot of students that are motivated by getting up and getting in the room and being active participants, then that might be something that you need to alter your classroom activities to. And that, I guess that would also go along with socially and emotionally too. If they're students that like to learn verbally, then maybe they need to be talking and discussing and doing think, pair, share activities rather than just sitting in their seats and having me get up and talk to them the entire class period. Academically, kind of looking at their assessments and doing a pre and post assessment to see what they already know, so that you can therefore maybe spend more time on a subject that they don't know in the unit and spend a little bit less time on something else is important. So doing that pre-assessment and then post-assessment to see what they learned, and if some students really didn't get much out of that unit, taking the time to spend some study hall time with them or some homeroom time with them would be important so that they can get that knowledge that they should have got during the unit. So just analyzing their work as well, even things that aren't tests, just taking a look at a journal and see if they are comprehending the way they should be with a reading assignment that you gave them, and see if they're understanding the strategy. Some students maybe just didn't understand your directions, and maybe that's why they got it wrong, or maybe they really don't know. So conferencing with those students is really important too. And when you do that, you can also learn a little bit more about them and their backgrounds. Some students, it might not be because they don't understand, it's just because they maybe were never talked about a certain subject matter before, so they might not have any background knowledge on it. So that would kind of go along with socially and emotionally. Also, when you're pairing students together, if they're working in groups, I recently did lit circles, so I made sure not only the book was on their level, but that they got along with the students in their group, or I thought that they would eventually be able to get along with them. That's really important when doing group activities. Sometimes it's okay to let them pair up by themselves, but other times it's really important to maybe get someone, for example, they peer edited each other's essays a couple quarters ago, and I made sure to get one student who was maybe a strong writer as far as their skills, and then I got another student that didn't have really good grammar, and I paired those two together so they could really balance each other out, and that was very successful. So that would be academic as well as socially too. So I think all three of those components are really important.
Well, knowing your students' needs and interests. For example, in here we've gone to a lot of a group setting where we have students in chemistry, for example. Some students struggle more, and some students learn better when they're in groups with other students. So just understanding your students can change whether your delivery type, whether it be direct instructions or more cooperative groups. And an example here is the fact that we've moved away, especially in chemistry and environmental science as well, to have more group project-oriented learning as opposed to direct teaching strategies where some students simply aren't interested in.
If I can change things to make it more reasonable, I will. If I can't, I explain why it can't be.
Right.
But at least I'm letting them know I'm aware that this is an issue. I just can't change it, and this is why.
Right.
So I think if you're really listening, you become more flexible and less self-centered. My class is not the only class you kids have.
Right.
Well, I would say on the micro level, I'm constantly adjusting what I think I'm going to do the next day because of what happened in the class before that, or 2 classes before that, or but I'm constantly adjusting. Even I would say even within a class meeting, depending on what. Of course, I have goals and things that I want to happen, but depending on what happens during a class, like we've had class meetings where we had something important to talk about, and so that took more time than I expected, and so we would adjust something. So that definitely influences not only that class meeting, but potentially other class meetings. Every class, it even says on the syllabus, every class is different in its pace and path. So, one class might get through something really quickly, and another class might take a little bit longer for a variety of reasons. So I try to take that into account and leave some room in my initial planning for that to happen. But also on the macro level, sometimes students give me ideas about new assignments to use in my classes. In my grad class this semester, I had an assignment that I had at the end of the semester, and I thought it would be really beneficial for me and for them if they did it earlier in the semester, because I think it would be a way to kind of enter into some of the ideas that we were talking about. Because by the end of the semester, they were really good at it, but I think there were some things that felt kind of natural to them about that assignment that maybe would have helped introduce some of the topics better. So, both ways on a daily basis and, in a more kind of planful way over time. And, I've been fortunate to work with lots of people in education where everything's a draft. Everything is always like up for change, and we're always, trying to do things better. And that goes back to that idea of praxis, where we're constantly thinking about how to go, what went well, what didn't go well, and what do I need to do better the next time or differently.
I'll say that when I first started teaching, my thought was that the kids needed to learn my subject matter before they walked out the door so that they were prepared for what came after. I still think that. But I altered my priorities. And my number one and number 2 priority is that my kids know they're loved and valued in here. Maybe not anywhere else. Maybe the sad fact is this is the only place they feel valued. But I can give them that. If they learn the subject matter, all the better. But I want them to feel good about themselves and to feel like this may not be my forte, but I can still be successful. I can still walk away from this knowing something, and most of all, that teacher loved me.
Definitely.